Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Our expert today, the one and only Ben Standig from The Athletic, who will give us not only the latest on everything going on with the Commanders, but he did his 5th annual agent survey this summer, and the results came out this week, so we'll talk about that in just a few moments. And I guess welcome back, Ben, for the second straight day after Fortier's chicanery yesterday.
Yes, that was fun. Look, as you know, when you're out there, sometimes you gotta shake it up a little bit. So you got to play along with us.
No, I got played as y'all were playing along. You're not driving anywhere, right? We can't have a repeat of the end of that phone call.
No, I didn't know what happened at the end of it. He got pulled over?
Yeah, he got pulled over for being on his phone.
Oh, amazing. I mean, not amazing, but amazing.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, I just should let everyone know that was listening yesterday. He's fine. He got a piece of paper that's going to cause him some nuisance, but nothing serious. Everything's just fine in Fortier land. But that was not great. First time that's happened, as far as I know, since it happened to Russell way back in the day, which I think Sam handled it with a lot more calmness, which is unsurprising. No.
That's Russell versus a 3-year-old toddler screaming. I would take the toddler. So,
there's
from
that.
a calm standpoint.
There's that. Hi, Chris. I know you love to listen to the show. Okay, this Chase Young thing. You had the first report on it. He goes to the doctor. Now week 1's in question. What do we know about Chase's status, and also how that reality matches the team's expectations?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, obviously he last played in that first preseason game against Cleveland, suffered a stinger, which, is typically not considered like a long-term situation. There's something else going on if it's continued this long. He has not practiced in full since, no contact. Ron Rivera told us last week that Chase was going to meet with a doctor to discuss whether or not he was could have contact. Twice after that, he was asked, hey, what's going on? And twice he declined to answer in any capacity. And what I reported today was there's progress being made in terms of the injury, but he's still not cleared for practice. He's meeting with another doctor this week, and we're at the point now where week 1 is no longer, we're not just going to assume anymore that he is playing. I'm not going to say it's percentage-wise whether he's in or out, but yeah, that is now definitely up in the air until they get more information, which is, this injury has gone on way longer than you would have thought based on the limited information that they provided us over the last few weeks.
So I think the frustration, Ben, is that Ron seemed to intimate when this first happened, this is no big deal, he'll be back in a couple of days. And there are sometimes he does that and things linger a little longer, but he's typically honest about some of those, like Logan Thomas. He's like, hey, we're just being super careful. This isn't a big deal, but it could be a while because we're being super careful. Am I misremembering things that this seems like both with his knee last year and how that was strung along and with this, that there seems to be some kind of disconnect between the information we get and the reality of the medical situation, and the way we get the information is via Ron Rivera?
Yeah, I mean, I think last year ultimately what happened was, as far as the team knew, Chase Young was cleared to come back several weeks prior to when he ultimately did. But it was up to him to say, hey, it's his body. How do you feel? Do you feel comfortable? And he continually said, no, I need more time. And I think they got themselves into, I guess, a little bit of trouble from the standpoint of putting out expectations based on what they had been told, but not necessarily based on what was going on in Chase Young's body or head or so on. This time, I think they're trying to put out no expectations, but, because of what happened last time, it's not saying it's backfiring because we don't have any expectations at this point, but at the same time, it's like, what's going on here? Is this a case of, at least this time, nobody is saying he has been cleared or that they expect him. It's still like, hey, he still needs to be cleared from a doctor. So I don't know. I mean, these injuries, we want them to tell us as much as possible. There's privacy laws and all that, but we want them to tell us as much as possible. But when you get drips and drabs sometimes and it's told in an odd way, and then Ron, I guess, that kind of blows up the other day when he was asked about it, it's like, what is happening here? This feels weird again. And that's where it gets tricky. I mean, here's the thing, right? Pick almost any other player on the roster, this exact same thing happening. And we're like, all right, well, these things happen. But it's because it's Chase Young and what happened after that knee surgery and what happened last year, it's like, what are we doing here? And that's where I think it starts getting kind of weird.
Right, and it just feels like we've been doing this with Chase for a year and a half now, and at that point you're just like, okay, we'll get out of this hellscape and cycle of not knowing what's going on, and Ron seeming to be mad about it. We'll see. Ben Standig from The Athletic with us here on the Hoffman Show. All right, let's run down some of the rest of the stuff that's happened over the last couple of days, and then I'm really excited to talk about the stuff you found in the agent survey. So, with F.A. Obata, was that a game injury? Like, what happened there? Because he seemed like if Chase wasn't going to be there, he seemed to be in line to be the starter. He had a phenomenal spring and summer. What happened with F.A. Obata that he's now going on IR?
Yeah, as a reminder, this goes with the Chase situation as well. They're not obligated, any team is not, no team is obligated to tell us what is going on with injuries until week 1 when they start putting out an injury report. So, that's partly why they were quiet on Chase. And in the case of Obata, we really didn't know anything. I mean, we had to ask Rivera today just what was the nature of the injury because we really didn't know Obata was out. Sometimes these veterans skip a practice because, rest day, they got something to do occasionally. I don't mean that in a flippant way. I mean, sometimes they're excused. So we had no real idea that this was any kind of an issue. Rivera said that there's a patella issue. Didn't really go into much more detail than that, other than to note that the other day he said Obata gave it a try in practice, and it really just was a struggle for him. So they decided he needs to let it calm down, give it some rest, and it doesn't sound like it's going to be long after the 4 weeks that he has to sit out because of going on IR, but they decided ultimately that is they wanted to give him at least that much rest. So, yeah, I mean, that's what's so crazy about this D-line. It is still a strength and all that. But Chase Young, we just discussed. Obata is on IR. They put Fedarian Mathis on IR. John Allen is dealing with plantar fasciitis. I'm assuming he's going to play, but maybe he's not 100%. So all of a sudden this group, which is a deep group, is got a lot of pieces limited or out going into the season.
Definitely. Ben Standig with us from The Athletic here on the Hoffman Show. Last thing on the team before we get to the agent survey, like what's the schedule look like between now and opening day? Because I think this is also probably affected by the injuries, right? Like you want to get as much good practice as you can before the season, but it seems like right now this team is at a point, which by the way is kind of ironic considering how healthy they were for the first part of camp, and kind of the Logan Thomas injury felt like it opened the floodgates and just everyone else started to go down. But it seems like they're just trying to get back to full health before the game against Arizona. So how do they handle this next week and a half to try to get there as healthy as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically the team is taking, everybody's kind of going off. Like I was talking to John Dotson today, said he's going to go up to Penn State this weekend. And I think Sam Howell's going back to North Carolina. So from the media perspective, we're not out there again until Tuesday, which is, I think, the day the players are back, and then it's a regular Wednesday, Thursday, Friday schedule like you would for any other week. So, I don't know if it's anything different than it would have been otherwise, but, yeah, they're taking a couple days off, getting themselves right. I'm sure those who need rehab or deal with the medical staff will probably be there, I would assume. But, yeah, I mean, they're getting a couple days off before things get going here, which is, reasonable in general. But, to your point with not just those linemen, obviously Terry McLaurin is probably the headliner of injured people that we just don't quite know what his deal will be with that sprained toe. So, yeah, there's some concerns for sure, and hopefully, this rest helps everybody get ready to go next week.
Yeah, definitely. McLaurin's still in a boot right now, but that's exactly where he should be. The boot is as much a precaution as anything. You can take the boot off, put a cleat on, and play next week. So we'll see if that's where Terry's at. All right, so you have done this now 5 years running, the agent survey. You surveyed 17 different agents on a variety of NFL topics, including some Commanders-adjacent things. What was the one that you were most excited to ask about? I thought a lot of the questions, I mean, all of them were fascinating in their own right, but like the running back thing I found specifically very, very interesting. You know, the varying thoughts on Goodell's future. There's a ton of different great questions you asked. What's the one that you were most intrigued by?
Yeah, I mean, I think the running back one probably, in part because it was sort of happening in real time. The discussion broadly about why don't running backs get paid anymore? Basically, what's the issue? And it was interesting because, look, these agents, obviously their job and those who represent running backs is to get them the most money possible. So I was curious, like, are they going to sit here and say the running backs are getting screwed? And they didn't actually. They basically all collectively said, look, we feel bad for them, but it's the free market, and it's no different than why do some stores thrive and other stores don't? Why? Look at my industry. Why are a lot of newspapers shuttering? And because people have chosen to find information in other ways, and it's just how it is with everything. But there was this disconnect, and the conversation publicly was interesting. So it was fun to see the agents' point of view on that. I think another one for me was the question about, is it time for the NFL to let outside money, private equity and or international groups like Saudi Arabia to come in and be owners, basically. The league has denied that for a variety of reasons, including, I think they want a front man. They want somebody to be in charge rather than just be like a consortium. But obviously the Saudi Arabia thing, right, has been huge in the news because of Live Tour and, the way they're attacking soccer and bringing major players there. And, the Live Tour, as we know, with those players got, crushed by everybody for taking the money. But what happens is things become normalized. And now in this survey, half the agents were like, not saying that they were condoning human rights violations, but they were basically saying, look, there's no point in denying this. The money is there. If the NFL is all about making money, it's probably going to happen at some point. Just get it done. And it's better for the players as well because it means more money coming in. If you have these groups that have a ton of money. And look what happened here with the Commanders, right? Josh Harris, as rich as he is, needed about 27 different partners, exaggerating, to help get it over the finish line. You wouldn't have that issue with some of these other scenarios. So I thought that was interesting just to hear. Some agents were appalled or opposed to that notion, but not everybody was.
Yeah, it was a really interesting mix. I thought there was definite thoughts all around. Of course, if the players get more money, that means that 3% or whatever percent the agent gets is more money too. So it's in their own self-interest on some level as well. Ben Standig with us, of course, writes for The Athletic here on The Hoffman Show, Team 980, the Odyssey app, YouTube. You know where to find us. Commanders adjacent, you asked about Eric Bieniemy, you asked about Dan Snyder, the entrance of one, the exit of another. Let's start off with Snyder, and then we'll finish off with EB. How real, now that agents can be fully transparent about this, not that they necessarily weren't before, but that he's like gone, how big of a hindrance to the football operation was Dan Snyder and his presence?
Yeah, I mean, pretty massive. When I started this survey, part of the reason why I did it was, the agents are at the intersection of the players, the coaching staff, the front office, because they have got to deal with all these different groups in favor of their client. So, when it comes to money, obviously there's nothing more, personal important than that. And Dan Snyder would be great at times because his impulsive nature would just say, yeah, here's all the money for, pick your player, Josh Norman. We want to, trade for Donovan McNabb, whatever it is. But, and some agents don't, it's flat admit, they're just taking the money. They don't really care. Like, neither do a lot of their clients. But the reality is, like, a lot of agents said, look, I gotta present my client with the best scenarios possible. And you want to go to find a team that's not just going to pay you, but be stable. Like, if my guy thinks he's going to be played an X role for this team, I don't want it to be that the coach or the GM is fired within a year because, then who knows? And the Commanders obviously have never been stable under Dan. Even when a coach or two stays more than 3 or 4 years, it's always like it feels very tenuous. And now they feel like a lot of these agents said, "Hey, now I can present Commanders to my clients in complete good faith. It's not just about they're going to pay you the most. It's all the other things." So I think it is huge in that regard. I mean, obviously, we'll see what the Josh Harris group does, but in terms of the Dan Snyder part of it, that was. For some of these agents, they were basically dealing with 31 NFL teams, not 32, in complete good faith because the Commanders were, just such a mess.
Yeah, wow, that's intense, and you always felt it covering the team, but your agent relationships are so good and have helped informed your reporting on so many things. It's good to see these quotes attributed to them, to the agents at large, obviously anonymous for the survey. The other guy you asked about was EB, and we'll wrap up with this, Ben. I think it's pretty interesting reading some of these quotes. There's one basically that's like everyone has hyped him up, reminds me of all the defensive coaches with the Patriots who left Belichick and failed. Everyone else seems to really love EB and thinks at worst he's in a tough situation, but he's a great coach and he'll either figure it out or he'll be fine somewhere else. There seems to be from what I can tell, and I'm curious to add the color that you have that doesn't necessarily make the piece to these conversations. Like, it seems that Eric Bieniemy is as beloved around the NFL as he is in his early stint here in Washington.
Yeah, I think people in general want to be optimistic about others, right? I mean, I don't think people want to, crap on somebody or just say, no chance, whatever. I don't know if there's like a specific reason to do so. And in the case of Bieniemy, obviously he was part of a very successful situation in Kansas City. There's no denying the level of intensity that he brings. And if you're into football and like sort of that old school coaching, that's going to absolutely, hit you in the right spot. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful with Bieniemy. But I think a lot of everybody also sort of acknowledge, no matter to what degree you are hopeful that it works out, you also have to admit it's hard to know because, Andy Reid was there. It's Andy Reid's offense. It's ultimately Andy Reid in the driver's seat, and Eric Bieniemy, even if he was calling plays for moments, it's sort of like when you're learning how to drive a car and you're in the driver's seat, but the teacher's sitting in the other seat and they've got brakes on their end. Like, that's kind of how ultimately it was with the Chiefs. Now there is no a supervisor looking over his shoulder who can ultimately say what to do. It's now on Bieniemy, and I think that's part of the intrigue. It has been such a fascinating and often polarizing conversation for the last few years. Now that's going to be lifted. Now we will see, can Eric Bieniemy do this? Of course, Sam Howell's a huge part of that, the offensive line and all that, but he's got the chance to call the plays, to run the offense, to put his stamp on it. And I think to that extent, that's a lot of where the optimism comes from. Both, some people think he can do it, but also it's almost like get that gift with the popcorn. Sitting there like, let's go. I want to see this already.
Yeah, and that's similar to some of the comments that you got about Rivera. Like, let's see how it goes. There's a lot. Josh Harris, to an extent, some of the comments. Let's see how it goes. Big, let's see how it goes. Year here in Washington. Ben Standig will have a front row seat to how it goes. Nice enough to join us with regularity here on the Team 980. Ben, great work on the agent survey. Everyone should go read it in The Athletic, and we'll talk to you soon. And I might see you out there in Ashburn next week.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend, guys.
All right, thanks. See you. That's Ben Standig, everybody.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.